My topic is public school inequality. To start off my topic, we should look at this image that shows the percentage of immigrants that have degrees. As we can see in the photo shown across, the numbers have been increasing for the education level of immigrants, which is something that is positive. However, we can see that the college degree level is sitting steadily in the 40s, and the postgraduate degree is also sitting steadily around the 20s mark. If we look at the next slide, which shows the ethnic distribution of college graduates, we can see that white or Caucasians are making up 59% of these graduates. Now, this could be traced back to the way they're interacting when they're younger and when they're getting their help in the early stages of school. If you grew up in an area that's more wealthy, you're going to have better interactions with your teachers and the people around you due to the better resources in the smaller classrooms that you were given. If you grew up in an area that was not as wealthy, the chances are you grew up at a school that may not have had as many teachers, so your classrooms were bigger, and that made learning a little bit more difficult for everyone else. If we go to the next slide, we can see the dropout rates for Hispanics, blacks, and non-Hispanic whites. We can see that the Hispanic rates were very high, and they've continued to decrease. However, they're still much higher than the next group. Now, this could be because of the way they were learning from when they were younger, but according to Molly McManus, she states that certain teachers do not give enough attention and effort to kids who are not as strong in school. This being maybe again off the area that you were raised in. If it was not as wealthy area, then the teachers may not have been as strong, and they may not have given enough attention where it should have been. Now, if you grew up in an area that was more wealthy, then maybe it was different, and you were given, if you were not strong, you were helped a little bit more and pushed a little bit more instead of the kids that were smarter than you. But it all depends on where you grew up. In conclusion, we can see the difference among immigrant/minority students were very large compared to Caucasian students. Again, this could be because of where some students grew up, as if you grew up in an area with lower income, and then schooling resources around you were probably not as strong. Again, however, if you were in an area where you grew up with higher income, then the schooling was probably much stronger. This would also lead to teachers not being able to interact with their students properly, and therefore not being able to give them an education they deserve. Now, if you grew up in a neighborhood that was wealthy, your interactionism will be a little bit different, and it'll be a little bit more stronger to the kids that needed the help.
Differences in work pay for immigrants in America. The work pay of immigrants in the U.S. is a topic that is highly reliant on legal status. Many immigrants who have the proper documentation or papers struggle to find suitable jobs to live in the U.S. The realities for what undocumented immigrants have to bear in order to work and live in the U.S. are truly unimaginable. In a PBS News video covered by Paul Solman titled, "The U.S. has a thirst for immigrant workers. Why do so many struggle to get legal status?" Solman is interviewing a man who remains nameless for his own protection. He asks him questions about his work as an undocumented immigrant working as a chef at a private club. I will now play a clip from the interview to show some struggles undocumented immigrants face in order to work in the U.S.
Couldn't they have found citizens to work for that kind of money?
I guess no, because it was days that I started 6 in the morning and I was in the club until like midnight, nonstop. So I guess not everybody do that. And sometimes I was mad, of course, because this is too much. But at the same time, I feel like I got my hands tied. If I say something, they might fire me. They might say something, to the authorities, the ICE in this case.
Because you're always at risk, yes?
Yes. We are in risk every day.
Breaking down the video clip. This is a prime example of what many illegal immigrants have to go through every day living in America. Most illegal immigrants have employers who will abuse them by paying unfair wages, having poor workplace conditions, and are constantly threatening to report their status to ICE if they do not comply. Oftentimes, immigrants are coming to America to simply obtain a better life and opportunities for themselves and their families that are not available to them in their home countries. Immigrants face barriers such as difficulty speaking the language of their employers and coworkers, and not understanding employment laws that protect employees. They usually will not receive minimum wage and are denied extra payment for working overtime. In addition, their employers may deny them breaks for meals or even going to the restroom. There is also a lack of training or safety equipment that meet basic safety regulations in order to make their jobs safer. Final thoughts. Implicit beliefs and stereotypes that support rejection of outgroups lead to discriminatory behavior. Prejudice against Latino immigrants in America is driven by widespread anti-immigrant sentiment. This is frequently connected to ideas of resource and economic scarcity. Donald Trump fostered anti-immigrant sentiment in 2015 during his presidential campaigns and said in interviews with the media that Mexico only brought drugs, criminals, and rapists into the United States. Categorizing Latinos by this rhetoric only serves to reinforce the stereotypes and normalization of these racist ideas, as well as fueling the people who support them. This is a truly devastating reality for undocumented Latino immigrants. They typically lack knowledge of American workplace laws and their own rights and protections, putting them at an even higher disadvantage when coming to America for a better life.
Different views on immigrants' access to health insurance in America. When it comes to access to health care for illegal immigrants, there is a nationalist and humanist belief. Humanists believe that the access to health care is a right that everyone should have regardless of their immigration status. On the other hand, nationalists argue that it is not a right and illegal immigrants should not have health benefits. Ideas like nationalists are the reason why there is high numbers in immigrants not having access to health care. For example, in this graph, data is being shown on immigrants in the U.S. who have challenges in accessing health care. We can see in this image that uninsured rates by immigrants are at 42%. If we look to the bottom right section of the graph, we can see that Affordable Health Care Act does not apply to immigrants. Even if you're a lawfully present immigrant, only 31% of 45 million immigrants are eligible for Medi-Cal. Based on the graph, due to immigration status, non-documented immigrants are eligible for access to healthcare data. In addition to the healthcare system relating to immigrants, there's an article named Immigration Status and Unmet Healthcare Needs. It specifically stated access to healthcare, however, also depends on non-socioeconomic factors. Healthcare access disparities between immigrants and non-immigrants can occur through several other channels, including language problems, differing social cultural concepts of health and illness, or bias among healthcare providers. This article also states that medical scientists believe that the education of the person influences the healthcare because they do not understand the implications of the symptoms. Issues like language barrier and transportation was one of the reasons why unmet health care was high in immigration data. Overall, there's different views when it comes to deciding whether or not health care is a right for illegal immigrants. Statistics shows us that there's a lack of health care that immigrants are being provided with. There are also factors that contribute to the access of health care, like knowledge and language barriers. With the concept of assimilation, immigrants have to forcefully adapt to the dominant culture in America. In America, it is a common concept that having health care is provided to them, which is something that immigrants have to adjust and adapt to if they are not being provided with those benefits. This concept is what illegal immigrants have to adapt to when coming to the U.S. and trying to have access to health care.
Immigrants' social adjustments in the United States. The American dream. When coming to America, immigrants have the American dream idea. Many have the mindset that they need to work hard in order to be here because it's the ideal norm. In the article, What Immigrants Say About Living in the United States, it states, a person has to work very hard in this country to make it. Nobody gives you anything for free. 22% say that qualifying for government programs like Medicaid or food stamps is or was a major reason for them to become a citizen. This explains that many immigrants work hard to not only live up to their standards, but to also care for and protect their family. Only few immigrants rely on public assistance. The language barrier. Most immigrants have what it takes to be an American, but language barriers prevent them from participating in their country, United States. Many immigrants think that it is essential to learn English. In the article called What Immigrants Say About Living in the United States, it discusses how immigrants feel the need to learn English. They feel like they need to learn English to be understood, or it is driven by pragmatism. About 85% of immigrants claim it is hard to find a job or do well in this country if they don't know English. Immigrants' parents want public schools to educate the children who do not know English, while the other half wants schools to hold classes that only speak English. Over the years, about half of immigrants have improved their language skills through classes, and many can now read a book or newspapers with no difficulties. Even though many immigrants have improved their language skills, they shouldn't feel the need to learn a new language because they feel as if they don't fit in. Language barriers and health departments. Immigrants have shaped the United States, especially the Latino community. Their work ethic is like no other, but adjusting to a new language is a huge barrier for not only them, but to many immigrants. For example, the Latino community. The older adults struggle when it comes to health services. Many immigrants have doctors that aren't fluent in Spanish, as it says on their resume. This makes it difficult for most immigrants because they can't communicate efficiently. In the article called "Language Remains an Obstacle for Latinos in Addressing Health Issues," it explains how errors have occurred in prescriptions and treatments due to language drawbacks. Nothing is worth in trying to explain your pain, right? Imagine trying to explain it in a language you have little or to no clue how to speak.
Housing is a basic necessity for any human, but it's still a struggle that haunts many immigrants in this country. In a CBS News article titled "Immigrants Struggle with Housing," it states, low and middle income immigrants are far more likely to live in overcrowded homes and spend at least half their income on housing than native-born Americans with similar incomes. The first problem with this is overcrowded housing, as there are direct links between crowding and health problems. Living in a household that is considered to be overcrowded results in a higher likelihood of obtaining infectious disease and mental health problems, as well as lower educational outcomes and acting as a mark of poverty. The second problem that's highlighted in our report would be how much more of their incomes immigrants have to devote to housing in comparison to non-immigrants with similar financial situations. Hispanic immigrants face the most troubles when it comes to spending high amounts of income on housing. A study by the National Housing Conference reveals, of the 1.2 million immigrant working class families that paid at least half their income for housing or lived in a diplomatic condition, nearly 60% were Hispanic, a group that constituted only 13.5% of the population. Our own federal government believes that we should not be spending more than 30% of our income on housing, but that's clearly not being followed by many immigrants, and especially Hispanics, in this country. This could explain why so many immigrants have to live in poverty or among the poverty lines, as they do not have adequate funds left over to support themselves and their families after covering just one basic necessity in housing. Social cohesion is a sociological concept that originates from Emile Durkheim and can be defined as the strength of relationships within members of a given community. When it comes to immigrants and their housing, integration into a newfound community has a lot to do with social cohesion. Immigrants will feel like they do not fit in if there's not a strong sense of social cohesion within the community they locate themselves in, making it highly difficult to adjust to the social life. Where immigrants choose to live matters a ton when it comes to what level of support they will be receiving from others within the community, making it either easier or harder to adapt into a new life.
In our communities, we often stereotype jobs in societies based on ethnicity. In the figure, you can see that jobs that immigrants hold are often the ones that require little to no education and are jobs that are found to be unappealing by society. Hispanic immigrants have issues finding work as a result of the language barrier. It is clear in a study by Okowicz, Willing, and Barnes, as it states how issues tend to arise when employers are dealing with accents and languages spoken by people who speak Spanish and rarely against those with British or other European accents. Due to employers wanting fluent English speakers, this results in immigrants to find jobs that don't require them to speak English. Hispanic immigrants are having a harder time finding job opportunities due to the lack of fluency in English and education. This is due to the inability to code switch to be accustomed to an English-speaking society with a variety of different cultural customs than what they are used to.